Show.
Welcome back to the Tammy McLeod Show on Fox Soul. We are talking about being Black in the workplace today. Discrimination, also negotiations. Why not throw in some money up in this bad boy? Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get this money. If you want more content like this, you can also download our Fox Soul app, or you can go to foxsoul.tv. You can also check us out because we're everywhere. We're on Fox Now, Fire TV. We're on Roku, YouTube, Apple TV, Zoomy, what else? Tubi, Zumo. There we go. I always get them mixed up. Zumo, Tubi, there we are. Or caffeine.tv. What I'm trying to say is wherever you log on, that's where we are, Fox Soul. So welcome to the conversation, because I'm bringing some more peoples in. I'm not a professional on this, but I like to bring the experts in. So we are talking to public relations consultant Stephanie Caudle. Hi, Stephanie.
Tammy, how are you?
And also award-winning author and professor, Kwame Christian. Hi, Kwame.
Hey, Tammy.
And we're bringing back Andy because, Andy's got that app that we all want to get our hands on and put on our phone because, somebody gonna ask us if they can touch our hair in the workplace. And we got to be able to download that bad boy, Andy, and report back. Yes, what do you want to happen? I would like for them to shave their head bald. That's what I want. Stephanie, you work in the advertising and marketing industry. How often have you been the only Black person at your company?
I have always been the only Black woman. There has never been a time where I've been in a place where there are multiple Black women in the room with me. And it's crazy, Tammy, because oftentimes my non-Black colleagues will come to me and say, "Oh, Stephanie, how can we find more Black people?" And I went to an HBCU, and I'm just like, there are many ways to find those Black people. Like, I went to college with them. All you need to do is open up your eyes and realize, like, you're locking some really amazing men and women out of this advertising and marketing industry.
Yeah. And when I hear white people say we can't find any Black people, it just simply means that they could care less about finding them, or they just don't give a damn. I guess that's the same thing. They don't give a damn. Because honestly, there are a numerous amounts of historically Black colleges and universities. And that's really, like, I'm not saying that's the only place you should look, but it should definitely be the first place you look, because you have a plethora of Black people who are skilled, who are experienced, and who are knowledgeable about whatever that particular study that they did at the school holds. And which HBCU did you go to, Stephanie?
I went to North Carolina A&T.
I went to Bennett, girl.
Bell, yes. And you know what's funny, Tammy, is that all these companies and all these folks say they don't know where to find Black people. But sadly, whenever George Floyd passed away, they quickly found those Black people that they needed to speak up. And so
I'm dead. I'm dead. Yep. They did. They absolutely found every Black person they wanted to find whenever they needed them to show their faces on television.
Absolutely. They had no problem reaching out, apologizing to them for the death of George Floyd, which I feel is so strange. But then most of all, like, they're reaching out now and they're saying, like, hey, I'm ready to hire more Black people now. What do I do? But it's like, you just told us months ago you didn't know where these Black people were, but suddenly you know where to find them now. So I think it's really interesting. And I think now more than ever, we really need to be paying attention to some of the moves that these companies are making.
Well, but my question here is, Stephanie, since you brought it up, are we mad at them for finally coming to the light? Or should we embrace that? Should we take advantage of the opportunity? Should we guide them?
You know what? I'm not mad. Like, I'm getting the money from them. I'm taking the opportunities. I'm not mad at all. And I've been encouraging all of my friends, like, hey, I know this might look like you're going to be the token Black person right now, but be that token Black person, because this is your opportunity to get your foot in the door. This is your opportunity to get those things that you've been demanding for. And at the end of the day, I look at it as reparations.
Oh, my. Well, I'm not going to take it that far. Me working is not reparations. We already worked for the reparations. So You're going to have to pay me and send me on a 30-year vacation for reparations. Speaking of, you're saying get what we demand. So let's talk about getting what we demand. Kwame, you're the director of the American Negotiation Institute. I did not know that such an institute existed. Tell me about that institution first.
Yeah, I didn't know the American Negotiation Institute existed. And then I made it. And then it did.
Sounds like a movie. It sounds like a movie.
Yeah, well, I'm passionate about this. My background's in psychology. I'm a lawyer, background in civil rights as well, but then transitioned into business law and mediation. And so then I decided to start the company. I wanted to do negotiation consulting, and this is what it turned into. But I think kind of going to the realization that right now there's a lot of emotional leverage as it relates to trying to advance Black people within companies. I think now is a great time for people to really start to have those difficult conversations and advocate for themselves, because the reality is that we don't get what we deserve, we get what we negotiate for. And the best time to do it for us is right now.
Is it really right now? We're in the middle of a pandemic, Kwame.
It is right now, because the thing is, even though the money might not be there, we want to make sure that we can get commitments for when the money does come. Ooh. We're the first people they think about. And I think one of the biggest challenges we have when it comes to negotiation is that we think about it too narrowly. Do I get the raise or don't I get the raise? But we're thinking about positioning ourselves. I think about negotiation more like a never-ending game of chess. I want to always put myself in the best position for success, always advance my position. And sometimes that might not be as it relates to getting money in the immediate term. Yeah. But then when we expand our perspective and look into the future, okay, I know what kind of conversations I have to have right now to put myself in the best position for success.
Yeah. So negotiating doesn't always mean the money.
Exactly.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly.
Okay. And why is it important to know how to talk about race in the workplace when it comes to money?
Well, the reality is that when it comes to considering equity as a whole, we have to think about getting equal access to opportunities, right? And so we're not just talking about ourselves, achieving for ourselves, but really we're recognizing that there are issues as it relates to equity and inclusion within our companies. So we're not just advocating for ourselves, we're trying to figure out how we can fix those structural holes within our organizations. And in order to fix those holes, we have to have those difficult conversations about race and how our workplaces inadvertently creating these outcomes that are disparate for different people.
Yeah. Andy, do you believe that's so what Kwame is saying?
Absolutely. I think that one of the reasons why you need to have these difficult conversations around race is we add a unique value to your organization or institution. And I think you have to point that out as part of your negotiation tactic. And I couldn't agree more with Kwame that every negotiation doesn't always end with a win, but it ends with more information, sometimes a pathway to a win. And you have to always think about that. People will make commitments to you in the context of a negotiation, and you can hold them to those commitments in the future. And I think that becomes incredibly valuable.
So let's talk about negotiating for a minute here. I am a fan of everybody knowing what everybody makes. Would you all disagree or agree with that?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. Are you looking at it, hey, Kwame, what's best for your business? Then yeah, let's keep it secret. So then people pay me as a negotiation consultant to help them to negotiate effectively. Now, if we're talking about what moves us toward justice and equity and fairness, I think transparency is really what we need, because we have been socialized as minorities, and also women as well have been socialized to be grateful for what we have gotten. And that makes us less likely to ask for what we deserve in these negotiations. And so we make the critical mistake in these negotiations of not negotiating. That's where most of us fail. And study after study have shown that white men are more likely to ask for additional income. Women and minorities are not. And so we're creating the system where we're saying, hey, you advocate for yourself. Oh, you're not going to? Well, I'm not going to give you the money unless you ask. And so it perpetuates these disparities going on and on throughout your career. So I think pay transparency is important. I think we should just pay people equitably from the start and not play this game where they have to advocate for themselves or not.
You said that we go in to negotiate, not to negotiate. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake people make when it comes to negotiation, especially in the workplace, is that they just don't do it. They don't do it. And so I have a broad definition for what negotiation is. I say any conversation where somebody wants something, you're negotiating. So we have the big obvious one about negotiation for salary, negotiation for title, those type of things. But what about negotiation for responsibilities? What about negotiating and saying no, putting up barriers and boundaries when we're given the tasks that don't advance us, but take away a lot of our time? And so we have to start having these conversations and advocating for ourselves, saying yes to the things that work, requesting the things that work, but also saying no to the things that don't work for us.
Why does it seem like, Andy, Black people are fearful of going in asking for a raise?
I think there's a concern that your employer will view that negatively and take draconian action against you, far more draconian than they might take against your white counterpart. And some of that may be paranoia, but I think a lot of that is based on the reality of the fact that there's racism in every aspect of our society, including in the employer-employee relationship.
Yeah, I have to say I understand that perspective very clearly, because I have a radio show in Los Angeles and I work at the only Black-owned radio station in probably at this point in the nation. I'm sure there are a couple of more Black-owned, but this is one. And if I were to lose that particular radio job, there's not another radio station in Los Angeles that would hire me because they're not looking for Black women. And so I understand the fear of going in saying, yeah, I think it's time for me to, I've been here. Stephanie, what are some ways that people can go in and ask for a raise? You, like I know, as a woman, we barely ask our families to leave us alone for 2 minutes. You know, we don't want to say no to our friends that call and ask us to come to a play date or a birthday party that we really don't even like the person who's having it. But so how is it possible that women can build up the courage and the nerve and the strength to have the audacity to ask for some money?
I think it's hard for women because oftentimes we're afraid to come to the table and ask for it because we don't want to appear as being demanding. And so one thing that I often encourage people to do is, like you said, be transparent with one another. When I'm going into a new job or a new opportunity, I'm asking my friends in the industry, like, hey, how much money are you making? Hey, can you tell me a little bit more about the work that you're doing? And then, like Kwame said, using that as leverage, because at the end of the day, if you don't have that transparency, you don't even know what you're coming in to demand for. You just know that you need to make a demand. And so the more transparent conversations you can have, the better you position yourself to be able to win.
Why don't we want to tell people how much money we're making? Why don't we want to be transparent about money? I think that is where Black people and families have gone wrong from the beginning of time, is that we do not have money conversations, and we don't talk about money like we talk about a television show. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have just average, normal conversations about money that don't frighten us, that don't make us feel a certain kind of way. Whereas other ethnicities tend to talk about money all the time, what they're going to do with it, where it's at, and how you get it. Why are we so afraid to talk about money?
I think we're scared, honestly. I think we're scared, like we talked about earlier, I think people are scared that, hey, if I make too much money, then everybody's going to be asking me for money. But then I also think there's this fear where you're just like, well, you know what? That's nobody's business how much money I make.
Yeah.
You feel like it's nobody's business? I'm not really sure. But I think we do hold on to that. Like, we don't want people all in our business. And it's one of those things like, what happens in this house stays in this house. And like you said, that ends up being really damaging to us because we never know how to negotiate because we don't know if we're being paid too low or not.
Wow, that's an important part you just brought up. I can't, like, what happens here, what happens in this house stays in this house. That has been killing Black families to no end, let me tell you, from molestation to money. The whole what happens in this house stays in this house thing needs to end today. I'm going to end talking right now, but we're coming right back because we're in a heated conversation on the Tammy Mac Late Show. We're talking about money, negotiations, and being the only Black person in the room at the workplace on Fox Soul.
This is the message. This is a message
for all the true fighters.
To all the true fighters.
True warriors.
True warriors.
The true champions.
We know that every battle comes at a price. You see it on our faces,
and we see it on yours.
So to the doctors, to the nurses,
to the first responders,
for your bruised faces,
for your battle scars.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for answering the bell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for going
toe to toe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your courage and your sacrifice.
All of us.
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 All of us
are in your corner.
Tammy Mac Show.
We're back on the Tammy Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. I'm laughing because my next question I want to ask each of you personally, and you might have to dig back into your memory banks to even answer this question, but we've all been in a situation where a coworker or a boss has said something racist. Do any of you remember something racist that someone has said to you that kind of caught you off guard a little bit?
I didn't know
if the computer had frozen or what.
I'm happy to say, look, I have been the coffee repair guy, the guy who parks car. I have been mistaken for every job but the job I've held in a million times. And
Andy, I don't know if I'm being racist right now, but you do look like the coffee repair guy.
I hear you. I hear you. So maybe there's that, but no. I've had folks who are unable. I mean, I'm 6'4", 300. I'm enormous. I've had folks confuse me for other Black people who are half my size.
Oh God.
So no, I don't have to reach that deep to talk about and remember, situations where I've been faced with racism. At least what I put you with.
Yeah, Stephanie, what about you?
So this kind of goes back to the whole salary thing. I remember I was in a job, and like sometimes whenever you go through a job interview process, they ask you how much did the last employer you had pay you. So I told the person, the hiring manager, how much money I'd made. So then when I took on my new job, I remember coming to her and I was like, hey, you're talking about a salary that's less than what the actual offer letter said. And she said, oh, didn't you just come from making $10,000 less? You should be thankful that you even have this job. And that should have been a red flag for me then. But that was by far probably the most racist thing anyone has ever said to me. Because I knew had I not been a Black woman, she would have never said that to me.
Wow. Kwame.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because I did civil rights work before and then started my own company doing negotiation and conflict resolution training. So I'm not racist toward myself. However, there was an interesting time as a mediator when I was mediating and an attorney was describing one of the people in the mediation. And they were talking about how the person's employment status was kind of doing kind of odd jobs, handiwork, that type of stuff. And they said, well, the person that we're mediating with, and it was just me and him. I do shuttle diplomacy, just one at a time. And he's like, well, the person that is on the other side, well, he's a Black man and his jobs are kind of inconsistent. He doesn't do, and I'm like, oh my goodness, how do I respond to this?
Because how do they have the nerve to say to a Black man that the man he's negotiating for is the Black man?
I was on the phone, but I feel like my voice kind of tells the story, and the fact that my name's Kwame is a pretty significant tell.
Yeah, you're pretty black, Kwame. You're pretty black on the resume. On the resume, you're pretty black.
Yeah. And so I was saying to myself, this is a really tough situation for me, competing interest wise, because I'm here representing the court and I have a limited amount of time for this mediation. How do I do it? Like which identity supersedes in this situation? Do I check him now? But then that's a whole 20-minute conversation. I don't have time for that. And so I said, all right, Kwame, the mediator, is going to stay neutral and I'm going to finish this mediation and get through it. But it's one of those situations where it is so flagrant that it catches you off guard, where you're not quite sure what to say in the moment.
Let's get some questions from our soulmates here. Jen J says, because Black folks are ashamed of being at the bottom, we brag about the most educated, but fail to mention the wealth disparity. There is shame with that. There's shame with that. So let me see if I can read it. Because Black people are ashamed of being at the bottom. We brag about being educated, but we fail to mention our wealth, is what she's saying. So we take pride in our education, but we don't take as much pride in our wealth. Is that because we don't have it? Maybe. You know, when you fake it, when you faking it till you make it, you probably won't brag so much about having it, because in the inside, you know, you really don't.
Well, I think you're onto something there, Tammy, because I think you have to figure out what you're proud of, and usually you will put that thing first. And then I think also there's the other side of it when it comes to financial literacy and education. And we always focus on income. How much money are you making? How much money you're bringing in, but not wealth retention, which is a completely different thing. And so that's why you see the education gap shrinking, the income gap shrinking, but the wealth gap still growing. That's a problem. And so I think financial literacy is something that will help there. But of course, we cannot go throughout this conversation about race and inequity, and especially the wealth gap, without talking about the reality of structural racism and how policies need to change. It's not all on us.
Another question from our soulmate. How do you all react to people who are white at your workplace who make a racial joke, being the only Black person or person of color in the room? That's a good question. It's kind of like you said, Kwame, do you check them right then and there, or do you just let that thing slide? Stephanie?
You know what? It's so funny because it made me think about the situation with Lecrae and the
yes, Lecrae, the gospel artist.
Yes, and you know how everyone was so mad at Lecrae because he didn't speak up and check them in that moment. And you know what I said to my friends? Like, I've been Lecrae before. Like, I've been in that position where someone has said something racist, and in your mind, it's like, did they just say that? Nah, they didn't just say that.
Remind everybody what the pastor said, because I can't remember.
Yeah, so he actually said that we should rename white privilege a white blessing.
Called it white blessing. And Lecrae kind of uncomfortably, I might add, laugh and not say anything. Yes.
He didn't say anything, but I think it was in the moment, because at the end of the day, he was there to do a job. Like, if he was not rapper Lecrae, he would not have been in that seat. And so I think it was awkward because you're trying to process it in your head. Did they really just say that? And do I check them now, or do I wait till later? And by the time you are finished processing it in your mind, the moment has passed and you hadn't checked anybody. But I think, you know, it happens to the best of us, because sometimes in that moment, you just don't know what to say because you're so shocked that someone had the nerve to say that to you.
Yeah, that you're right. We are oftentimes quite shocked at the gall of what people just flat out say to our faces, you know, the Karens of the world. But there are also these mini Karens that run around on a daily basis within the workplace. And you're like, did they just say that? What the hell? Talk to us about your Black Girl Group, Stephanie.
Yeah, so Black Girl Group, we are a full service staffing agency for the marketing, advertising, and PR agency. And we connect African-American women freelancers to companies seeking to outsource more diverse talent. So literally, we're trying to change the landscape of the marketing, advertising, and PR industry. And like we talked about earlier, I'm literally trying to bring more Black women to the table so that I'm no longer the only one sitting there.
Kwame, you say people aren't morally corrupt. Did I get that right?
Yeah, and so I think a lot of times when you think about it, most people aren't morally corrupt. They're just morally blind. They are completely unaware of the impact of the things that they say. And so, for example, going back to the joke example, I think about that like it's a negotiation too. Offer acceptance. They offered a joke. The way you accept it is by laughing. You have to reject it by not laughing. And a lot of times we force ourselves to laugh to protect them from their discomfort. But what about our discomfort? Our discomfort is real and it's legitimate. And so, step one, don't laugh. And then step two, just ask, I don't get it. Can you explain it to me? Because when you do that, first of all, they feel stupid because if you have to explain a joke, the joke didn't land. Second thing is, it forces them to reveal the premise of the joke. And that's the underlying truth that is unspoken. And if you can get them to actually articulate it, that's where the racism lies. And they don't want to do that. And so usually if you just say, hey, I don't get the joke, can you explain it to me? That's when they get it. They say, okay, sorry. I've never had somebody get to the point where they actually explain it. They
But
just
then
apologize
do
at
you
that point.
become the person nobody can joke around at the office?
That's possible. That's possible. And here's the thing. When it comes to difficult conversations about race, it's the social aspect that really holds us back because we don't just go to work to make money. We have our social relationships there too. And I think that's why it's so important to get allies. So people of color and white people to come at your side when this thing kind of happens. So you're not ostracized by that process. You have other people. It's a critical mass that we need to get to where doing that doesn't put you out from the flock. It actually makes you the popular person, right? And I don't mean like doing this in terms of virtue signaling to just look cool to other people, but I mean we have to get a lot of good people willing to step up and have these conversations so that when somebody actually does have the conversation, they're not ostracized for it.
Well, it's kind of like Black Lives Matter didn't matter, and I'm speaking in terms of the actual organization and the actual Black Lives Matter mantra didn't matter about 3 years ago, and people didn't really want to attach themselves to it. But now all of a sudden it's come back around and become the popular kid in school. So I get exactly what you're saying. Andy, I want you to explain to me before we get out of this panel about the app, Not Me Again.
Sure. I mean, we've covered a number of situations where the hashtag Not Me app could be incredibly valuable, raising concerns around inappropriate jokes, inappropriate interactions at work is exactly what the app is there for. And so in addition to everything that folks have suggested you can do in response to these situations, you can whip out your mobile device, pull up the app, and report the concern in a safe, secure way.
And you can be anonymous or choose to say who you are.
Absolutely right.
And then who contacts your place of employment through that app?
The folks at the Not Me team. So the Not Me team takes your action. And
doesn't have to have the app.
They do not have to have the app. If they do sign up for the app, they can get some data analytics that can be helpful in them fine-tuning their response process. But they do not have to have the app for you to use the app to report a concern.
This app sounds like it can change the game. Do you hear what I'm saying? It could totally change the game. Andy, Stephanie, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Kwame, I want you to stick around with me because I got a little segment here that we're going to do some more talking in. It's the Tammy Mac Late Show. We ain't going nowhere. Come right back. Join us on Fox Soul.
Tammy Mac.